My wife and I are in the city of Seattle, and I'm waiting for her to get one of those electric bikes because there's no way she's going to try to keep up with me while I ride my Onewheel up the steep hills of Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood. I'm Jimmy Chang, and I like to ride electric vehicles and electric rideables like this Onewheel. Riding up a steep hill can be a challenge for new and experienced riders alike. In this video, I hope to go over some of the common pitfalls of riding uphill and share some tips on how to be safe going up and down steep hills. We are in Seattle's neighborhood of Queen Anne, which is just northwest of downtown Seattle and sits on the highest hill in all of Seattle at a whopping elevation of 456 feet. Coming from Colorado and having taken my electric unicycle on the highest paved road in America at over 14,000 feet in a previous video, 456 feet may not seem like much, but there are some very steep roads in this city. I mean, just check this out for example. I'm gonna hill test my Onewheel Pint and see if it can make it up and down these steep hills. I'm also going to take you to Cary Park, which is one of the most amazing parks with the most amazing views of Seattle, and I'm going to stop by a farmer's market. Going uphill on a Onewheel Pint can be challenging, and this will be my first time trying such steep hills on a Onewheel Pint. Too often I hear people nosediving while going uphill. They are dazed and confused because at the time of the fall, they weren't going very fast, and they never felt even a hint of pushback to warn them before the fall happened. Before we proceed, let's make sure we're all on the same page about this nosedive business. A Onewheel nosedives when the demand placed on the motor exceeds its ability to keep you upright. But before a nosedive happens, the board gives you one last gasp to warn that something bad is going to happen. And the board does this by giving you something called pushback, which is when the board lifts the front of the board to tell you to settle down. Disregard pushback and continue to go hard and fast, you'll end up with some good scars as a reminder of just how much fun you had. Unfortunately, the rules change a bit when going uphill. Since it takes more effort to battle the effects of gravity when going uphill, you end up hitting the nosedive threshold much earlier and at a lower speed than normal. Listening to the motor strain and feeling the surges as the board works, it's a little nerve-wracking. To make matters worse, because most are not used to riding up steep hills, and because pushback can be more subtle on inclines, riders often don't sense the pushback, which would normally signal them to slow down or stop. And another evil of riding up a steep hill, if you're thrown off on your board during a nosedive, you're tossed forward into the hill, giving you less time to recover and try to tuck and roll. This is why so many people get injured riding up steep hills, breaking wrists and clavicles. So how do we ride up a steep hill safely? Here are some tips. Number 1, make sure you have your safety gear on. Number 2, make sure you have a sufficient battery charge. Going uphill drains the battery very quickly, and when you have a low charge on your board, you're more likely to nosedive. Tip number 3, go slow. Tip number 4, ride expecting you may fall at any moment. Tip number 5, carve. Imagine you're doing switchbacks on a road or trail. Doing that, going uphill, makes things a lot easier by tackling the incline in small sections by going back and forth up the hill, rather than just charging straight up the hill. By carving, you make your own switchbacks, which should take less energy and put less strain on the motor. Next tip, beware potholes and bumps. Any little thing that adds additional strain to the motor could be all that is needed to overpower the motor and push you into a nosedive. And finally, have the courage and respect to go uphill. Be like the little engine that could. Give it a shot using the tips we just went over and believe that you can do it safely. Tell yourself, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. But don't go too fast, and always be prepared to fall, just in case your board can't. And when you get to the top, enjoy the fruits of your labor. Sometimes the best views in life require you to work hard to get to the top. Once you're there, take some time to enjoy the view. Here I am at Cary Park in Queen Anne, which has picturesque, postcard-like views of the Seattle skyline with Mount Rainier looming in the background on super clear days. After enjoying ourselves at Cary Park, we continued on to a farmer's market in Queen Anne. I want to thank SUPrents for allowing me to have this rental while in Seattle during this trip. If you haven't heard by now, SUPrents is my go-to way to travel with the Onewheel. Wherever I want to be in the continental US, they will ship a Onewheel there for me so I can have it during my stay. And when I'm done, I just box it back up and send it back. It's super easy. It's also super convenient and easy and stress-free, especially if you're looking to see if the Onewheel's for you. If you're thinking about buying the Onewheel but have a hard time pulling the trigger on such a large purchase without having tried it, try their demo program. It's almost like a rent before you buy program. It's pretty sweet. The farmer's market was great. We got to try some new foods, we got to listen to some music, we got to do some people watching, and some people got to watch me while I was on my Onewheel. It was a lot of fun. After we were done with the farmer's market, we headed back. That's my wife running. She decided she didn't need a bike to go back downhill, so she decided to run. We stopped by Cary Park, enjoyed the views one last time, and then what goes up must come down. And when I say go down, did I say a busy, steep street with a lot of cracks in the road? Well, that's what I meant to say. I should have checked my battery before and after going down this hill, just to see how much regeneration I would get out of it with my battery, but I didn't think of it at the time. The Onewheel uses regen to slow and stop the board. Basically, the energy is harnessed by the motor when you slow yourself down a hill, and the energy goes back into the battery. When going down a long hill, make sure you don't have a full or nearly full battery. If your battery overcharges from regeneration when going down a hill, the board will shut off to prevent you from ruining the battery. And instead of ruining your battery, you end up ruining your day. At this point, with a steep hill and the speeding cars, I'm 100% putting my trust into the device that it will be able to slow me down. If the motor were to fail, instead of a nosedive, I would most likely grind the back end of the board into the ground, giving me a second to compose myself as I prepared to jump off the board. Or I could just lose my balance and get thrown into the traffic. I imagine either scenario could play out. Have you ever nosedived when going uphill? Have you ever had your board shut off while riding downhill? Got any other tips for riders in hilly regions? I'd love to hear it in the comments below. I have to admit, when I made it down to the bottom, I did have some sweat on my brow and I let out a sigh of relief. This was a fun adventure. I hope you guys learned something. If not, I hope at least it was entertaining. Thanks for watching, and as always, be sure to wear your safety gear.
Do you want to move down? He looks like you're like a cat.